So it's been almost 2 weeks since I posted my last update video on my reading of the Stormlight archive, and here is another one. So the first notable change is that I managed to collect all of them in my bookshelf in the correct order. For those of you wondering, it's The Way of Kings Part 1 and Part 2, Words of Radiance Part 1 and Part 2, then a novella, which is Edge Dancer, then Oathbringer Part 1 and Part 2, then another novella, which is Dawn Shard, and finally the massive book, Rhythm of War. Rhythm of War is the fourth book in the Stormlight Archive series, and this is the latest one that came out, I think, in November of 2020. That might be wrong, it's not factually, it's just something from my memory. However, last time I made a video on the Stormlight Archive, I mentioned that I had read through Words of Radiance Part 1. Well, now I have finished Words of Radiance Part 2, and I'm not here to talk about the plot, because the plot will get really confusing for people who are not, who have not followed the series up from the first book, and it really wouldn't make for an interesting, update. For those of you who don't know, Brandon Sanderson also has a YouTube channel where he posts weekly updates on how far he's gotten into working on different books, different projects, and most importantly, the weekly updates which I follow are his videos where he mentions what percentage of work he has done on Stormlight Archive Book 5. So for those of you who are keeping track, that's a good place to start. However, I have finished Book 2, Part 2, which successfully puts my reading point at 2 books in the Stormlight Archive. And for those of you who are wondering what the Stormlight Archive is about, those of you who haven't seen my previous videos on the topic, to give you a little run through, it's an epic fantasy book written by the author Brandon Sanderson. And he says, and I agree with him, it's one of the best epic fantasies out there. It's perfect in every way. If you think of the word fantasy, you think directly of the word imaginary. He has pushed fantasy so hard that every single thing in these books is imaginary. From the names to the flora, fauna, the topography, the world, the planets, the moons. I've mentioned all of this in my last video. And he's created all of that by putting in long 10 hard years, 1 decade of working on the Stormlight Archive. So for those of you who do follow the plot, it's good to note that you need to go in a specific order. And I know that after reading Words of Radiance Part 2, you need to go for Edge Dancer, then you go into Oathbringer Part 1 and Part 2. The reason I buy the parts is because it also looks good and it's much easier to manage. Like, you have one part and then you can give yourself a little time before you read the next part. That leaves you on a little bit of a cliffhanger. However, I have gotten into reading the second book and I'm about to start the Edge Dancer. And for those of you who do not know, another thing that Brandon Sanderson has announced is that the next book of the Stormlight Archive will be coming out in 2024, nearly 4 years after Rhythm of War. And he's announced that it's going to come out in 2024 because it's going to take a long time for him to work on it. But the thing is that the 5th book of the Stormlight Archive series might be the final book with the current cast of characters. Maybe from the 6th book, we're going to start getting the characters who appear in the novellas. So the novellas are important. And I mentioned in my previous video, every book has different interludes in between the parts. For example, a book consists of Part 1, Part 2, and Part 3. In between, after changing, from when you change from Part 1 to Part 2, in between, separating them will be an interlude of 3 or 4, side characters, different characters. And my hunch is that they will be the main cast from Stormlight Archive Book 6. However, we have a long wait till 2024, even though the online page shows that it's projected for November or December of 2023. He has himself announced it's going to be coming out in 2024. When I got Rhythm of War, I just couldn't stop admiring it. It's a massive book with nearly 1,300 pages, a very small font, really superior vocabulary, and it's just really big. It has a small font, big pages, lots of pages, and really strong vocabulary. For those of you looking to get into the Stormlight Archive, it should be noted that the language here is very high level. The vocabulary is very good. Since it's based in a fantasy world where there are kings and soldiers, people talk in that sort of formal way. and that creates for a much better vocabulary. So that's just something to keep in mind and something to note while you're reading the Stormlight archive. So I intend on posting less frequent but more updates on the Stormlight archive and my reading of it. The entire Cosmere universe, which is the universe created by Brandon Sanderson, is really, really big. And if I'm not wrong, even Brandon Sanderson's Mistborn series takes place in the Cosmere. I might be wrong because I haven't read much into the Mistborn and I really haven't touched any of the books at all. This is my first series that I've picked up from Brandon Sanderson and I'm really enjoying it. So I'll continue to post my updates and hopefully you can get the book and read along with me. I really enjoyed this book and thank you so much for watching. It's just a small little update to keep you guys a little interested in the Stormlight archive and to share my experiences and my happiness and joy while reading the series with you. So I'm off to continue with Edge Dancer. Maybe I'll just skip to Oathbringer. The last book left on a very good cliffhanger. I really want to go to Oathbringer. But that's all for me today. Thank you.